Everyone's been admitted from the waiting room, it looks like.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, and I imagine people will continue to pop in. It's nice to have such a big group.
Yes. And I did want to say a disclaimer, we are recording this session, so we can share the recording with you after.
All right, so we're 1 minute past noon, so I am good to get started if you are Emily and April. Want to be respectful of everybody's time that's joining us. So my name is Tess Surprenant. I am the director of the Bloch Career Center. And this is one of my very, very favorite topics to discuss. And so I'm glad that it seems like it's of interest to a lot of you guys also. So, couple quick little things. Let me, like I said, I'm with the Career Services, so quick little plug for our office. We're really here to help you with anything career related. And so we're here, we help undergraduates and graduate students interested, as well as alumni interested in pursuing careers in business. We do this through workshops, a lot of programming where we invite employers in to help build those connections. And you have access to all of our services, and you can really get access to everything via Handshake. So that's our platform. So if you want to schedule a one-on-one meeting with us, you can go into umkc.joinhandshake.com, log in with your SSO, and you'll have access to all of the programming as well as appointment scheduling. So getting that out of the way. So we're here to talk about negotiation today, and why would we negotiate? And obviously more money is one of those reasons, and I always encourage everybody to try negotiating. Can we do a quick sort of like little Bitmoji wave of hands? How many of you have actually negotiated a salary or text something in the chat box? Anyone negotiate in the past? Got a couple thumbs ups, raised hands. Fabulous. So we've got a few people, but it doesn't look like it's the majority of you, which is perhaps then why you're here. So it's pretty daunting experience, and I think most people hate to do this. I always tell this story of my sister, my sister was this executive with H&R Block, and all her life she's really hated negotiating, just to her core, hates the idea of it. When she had gotten her job offer, I was saying, are you going to negotiate? What are you going to come back with? And she's like, I'm not going to negotiate. I'm like, are you nuts? And then she found out later that an individual, a male who had been hired roughly about the same time that she had, wound up getting paid about $50,000 more ultimately than she did. And she found out in conversations with him that he had negotiated, and then she was frustrated. So we negotiate not just for the money, but I think it also really does have this big impact on our job satisfaction if we realize that we're getting paid less than somebody else. And there's a lot of talk that negotiation shouldn't be necessary, that companies should just make the best offer possible, and then you don't have to go through this. But for right now and for the foreseeable future, I think it is an important part of the process. So we're going to talk a little bit about negotiating that first job, that salary, that initial salary offer. But then we're going to, at the end, we're going to talk about how this applies also to raises and promotions, which is a little bit different spin on the same topic. The crazy thing about negotiating salaries is that it tends to have this long-lasting impact, and you wouldn't think that this would be something that's going to follow you throughout your entire career, and yet over and over we find that it does. And so research has shown that what happens is that when you would take a job and say you're offered a job, for ease of math, I'm going to just say 50,000. You offered a job at 50,000 and you don't negotiate. And so you get your 50,000, then all of your promotions, all of your bonuses, all of your increases, cost of living increases, and future earnings are really based on that base salary number that you start with. But the thing is, it doesn't always just sort of impact your time at that company, because what studies have shown is that this actually impacts what you'll make at your next job and then the next job after that. And so while it shouldn't, what we tend to do is say, well, I'm making 50,000 at my current job. Now I'm going to get a new job, new company, and I'll be happy if I'm making $10,000, $15,000 more than what I was making before. It makes it worthwhile for me to change companies. I'll feel like I'm moving ahead. And so in our minds, we're starting to think, well, I'll be happy if I have $55,000, $60,000, rather than negotiating and looking specifically at what that job would pay, which might be something closer to $70,000 or $80,000. But because we're still holding on to that number that we started with, we tend to think of it when we're moving into the next job. So the implications of this is actually quite profound. So people who get into this habit of negotiating initially and then continue to negotiate their salaries, by the end of your career, the gap is huge. And then if you're looking at how much this all adds up to over the years, you're looking at more than $500,000 oftentimes in terms of what would happen if you don't negotiate and you kind of just let this number follow you throughout your career. You'll still advance, you still make more money, but it's just not as much as what would be the potential. So you should negotiate. Everybody should negotiate. Women especially don't like to negotiate. This too has been shown in study after study, is that women tend to be the ones that don't negotiate, whereas men do, which then adds to this salary gap that we're seeing. So everybody should negotiate. And it's really not that difficult. So when you're thinking about what you should be negotiating for, I always tell people, start with base salary. Sure, money isn't a guarantee of happiness, but lack of money is almost a guarantee of stress and unhappiness. So let's start with the money. Let's start with the base salary. And then other things that you can negotiate, signing bonuses. I don't know, anyone ever get a signing bonus with their jobs? Getting a few shake of the head no. This is an amazing concept. We got a couple people who have gotten signing bonuses. There's companies out there that, they will give you money just for saying, yeah, sure, I'll take the job. It's a one-time payment. Usually on the low end, maybe it's $500, depending on the job, where you are in your career. It might be $50,000, it might be $20,000. I think that a really sort of common number is somewhere between $3,000 and $7,000 for most people. Once you've gone beyond that entry-level job, I'd say for most entry-level jobs, it's maybe $3,000 to $5,000 is a common number. But oftentimes they only offer it when you ask, and so that's another thing that you can negotiate. If you're relocating, if they're asking you to move to another city, I would definitely say negotiate for relocation benefits. And different companies do it differently. Sometimes they'll just give you a set amount, like a flat rate, and then you either spend it or you don't on your relocation. And other times they'll say, here's the sort of things that we pay for. Here are the vendors, send us receipts, and then we'll reimburse you for it. But relocation is a really common payment when they are anticipating that you would move for the job. And then, of course, there's other things, non-money things that you can negotiate for. Depending on the organization, you might be able to negotiate vacation, or what your seniority level is. Oftentimes, that vacation sick time isn't something that can be negotiated for people who are a little earlier in their career, but once you hit that executive level, oftentimes that's a very negotiable thing. Now, I will say that it's an interesting time that we're in right now, because more and more companies are saying that, our policy on vacation and sick time is that we don't really have a policy. You can take off what you need. And this is sort of a good and a bad thing. It's maybe not as exciting a benefit as it sounds to be. So for a company that's offering this, oftentimes they're saying that, this is this fabulous thing, you can unlimited vacation, but the reality is that there are limits. They're not going to let you take off just endless amounts of time. Usually they sort of have a parameter that they're looking at, somewhere in between 2 and 4 weeks is what most companies would normally give for a vacation policy. This is actually a better benefit for the employer than it is for the employee in a lot of ways. So many companies, if they give you vacation time, a set amount, say 4 weeks of vacation time a year, if you don't use it, they'll allow you oftentimes to carry some of it over to the next year. Some companies have a policy that they will pay you out any unused portion at the end of the year. Some companies have a policy where they'll pay you out unused vacation when you leave the organization. So they give you this, you accrue it, it is your time to spend. Whereas companies that are not giving you vacation, but just allowing you to take off, are not guaranteeing you any sort of payout on this later, because there's nothing to pay out. So, but it's good to know exactly what that benefit is at the time that they're offering. And again, you usually don't get to negotiate. If they're a no vacation granted company, you probably are not going to be able to negotiate that you want to be given vacation. But if it is something where they offer vacation, oftentimes you can ask for a few days extra, a week extra a year. I would say, another thing that you can negotiate, and I would used to always say, don't talk about this upfront, talk about it later, but the idea of, can you work remotely? Are you able to work a hybrid schedule? But these days and age, this day and age, I'd say this is something you can easily negotiate. And so if working a hybrid schedule is important to you, then that's something that you can negotiate as part of your onboarding package. But I would also say, for really any of these sort of things, understand the organization and the culture. If this is a company that says, our big focus is getting everybody back into the office, then I wouldn't really heavily negotiate that I want to work remotely, fully remotely, or hybrid. So understand what the culture is. So I know a lot of people say it's all great. I know that I should negotiate, but I don't even know where to start. And it's only as good as the knowledge that I have of how to instigate this conversation. And it's really not that difficult. So I always say, start with your homework. And what happens is they'll give you a call. So, as you probably experienced in your job, somebody at some point after the interview says, we really liked you. The whole team was really, really impressed with you. We'd like to offer you the position. They'll give you the job title. Here's the salary. And we hope that you can start on whatever date. And don't say yes. Don't say yes right away. So your first thought should be, thank you very much. And then, can you send that to me in writing? Or can you send the full compensation package to me in via email? And so that you know exactly what it is. Because oftentimes when they give you that salary, That's not usually your entire compensation package. So whether you're in sales or not in sales, oftentimes there's performance bonuses that are attached to your job. So if you meet your goals and your department meets its goals and the company meets its goals, you get a bonus, and sometimes multiple bonuses. And then the whole vacation or flex time or any of those things, that will be spelled out in that full offer letter. And you really want to know all of that, all of the benefits. What's the 401? What's the profit sharing? What's the pension? What's, all of it. You want to have a full understanding of it before you say yes or no. And so make sure you get a copy of it. And then make sure you ask for some time so that you can really look at it and make sure that you understand everything that's in the offer before you give them that answer. So if they give you that phone call and you're excited about it, the best thing to do is say, thank you so much. Really, really excited about this opportunity. I was wondering, can you send me an email with the full job offer? And I'd love to be able just to take a good, careful look at that before giving you my answer, yes. So could you send that to me? And then could I have a few days to think it over or to look at it? And almost every company is going to give you a few days. And maybe you need to be a little bit suspicious if the company doesn't, but they should give you a few days to think it over. So then the negotiation starts in that next conversation. So you still haven't accepted the job. You've been grateful. You've said thank you. You've shown your enthusiasm, but the negotiation really starts when you call them back. And again, the first thing to do, say thank you. Super excited. Really, thank you for sending me that full offer. It was really exciting to see everything that the company offers its employees. And then I like to start the conversation with, I was wondering, is there any room for negotiating the base salary? And I think it's a really great way to just open up this conversation. I was wondering, is there any room for negotiating the base salary? After I've said thank you, after I've expressed that I'm really excited. So what happens is they'll either say, nope, not at all. We made the absolute best offer that we can make to you, or our company's policy is that we don't negotiate offers, that what we offer is, and then so then it's good to know what are your limits and expectations. So if it's a good enough offer, then are you willing to accept it? If it's not a good enough offer at what they've originally offered to you, would you be happy if they gave you a signing bonus? And would that then seal the deal? So you kind of have to know ahead of time where you're going to fall with all of these. So kind of do the what if scenario planning in your head before you give this call back. So if they say no, then you can say, oh, it's, that's okay. It's a really great package. I am excited about it. Is there a signing bonus associated with this position? And then oftentimes they'll say, well, maybe, what were you thinking? And I'd say kind of good rule of thumb is about 10% of what the salary is for a signing bonus. And just throw the number out there, shut up, see what they have to say. Oftentimes we say a number and then we start apologizing for it. Don't do that. Just, so if they say, what were you thinking? Give a number of about 10% of what the base salary is, and then let them answer. And it might seem like it's a year before they come back, but it's probably only a few seconds. And then you can go from there. Usually what happens though, when you say, I was wondering, is there any room for negotiation on the salary? Usually they'll come back with, what were you thinking? And I would say, give them a number. Don't give them a range, give them a number. And so, and again, I'd say the good magic number is about 10%. rounded up of the base salary that you were offered. That 10%-ish range really shows that it's a reasonable request. You know, if you start asking for 50% more, 30% more, people are going to be like, wow, you know, I'm not sure that we can make this person happy. Their expectations seem very far off. They probably still won't renege, but they probably are going to be a little worried. But 10% is a super reasonable number. Now, if you're applying for a more aggressive sales position, I think you can sometimes go a little bit more than 10%, but for everything else, I would say 10% rounded up. So again, you give your new number and then an explanation of why. I was really hoping for something closer to, if our offer was 50, I might say I was really anticipating something closer to 55. Because I bring a lot of expertise. I've been working in a very similar type of role. I know that I'd be able to just hit the ground running. You know, I did an internship with you. I bring a lot of, while I might be new to this particular role, I bring a lot of expertise on the industry with me, whatever it is you have. And everybody has something. Then that's your explanation for why you think you deserve that extra 10%. And keep in mind, they like you at this point. They really like you. And they're really committed to you at this point. So they're not offering this job to you with the idea if you don't take it, then they'll just move on to their next candidate. It rarely works out that way. If you don't take this, they very likely don't have a second candidate that they're very excited about. And oftentimes they don't have anybody that they're even remotely excited about. And the idea of having to go start this whole process again is not very appealing to them. They have interviewed you. They like you enough that they want to bring you into the organization. And so usually they're pretty happy just to have that negotiation conversation with you. So you brought up your number, you've thrown it out there, and then oftentimes the response is going to be, I'll have to go to whoever is the other organization. So if you're talking to the hiring manager, oftentimes they'll say, well, I'm going to have to run this by HR. If you're talking to HR, they'll say, well, I'm going to have to run this by the hiring manager. It doesn't make any difference. They always want to buy some time by having to talk to the other person. So it's pretty rare that they'll just turn around and say, yep, sure, $5,000 more or 10% more. That's absolutely fine. It's usually well, let me check and I'll get back to you. And then oftentimes they'll say, was there anything else? And then if I haven't brought up a signing bonus, maybe I bring up a signing bonus. And usually I would suggest only a couple things to negotiate. And so pick the things that are most important to you, because if you got this whole laundry list of like, so I was thinking about a signing bonus and I was thinking about this and I was thinking about this and I was thinking about this. Now you're kind of wearing on their patience. You definitely want to negotiate for that relocation package if they're asking you to move. So that's an important one. I'd say a signing bonus is an important one because it's just a check they're going to give you and it's nice and easy for everybody and very nice for you. But if they've given me the salary increase I was looking for and the signing bonus, and they've guaranteed that they're going to pay relocation, it depends again also on where you're at in your career. The more senior you are, the more you would be expected to negotiate more things. The more junior you are, you're going to have to pick and choose which ones are most important to you. So I'd say 2, maybe 3 additional things beyond base salary, and then assume that you can work the rest of it out when you start the job, once you've already accepted. Because oftentimes things like hybrid schedules, working remotely, it doesn't need to be negotiated right now. Oftentimes that's something that you've been on the job for a month, 3 months, that can be something that you bring up at that time. So think about what it is that you really need to get locked down now. So, that doesn't seem so bad. And very likely they're going to come back. They're going to say, we can't do the full 10%, $5,000 or whatever that dollar amount. Don't give them a percentage, give them a dollar amount. So we can't do the full 5,000, but I talked to the manager and we can do an additional 4,000 to get you to 59,000 or 54,000 or whatever. I can't even do my math anymore. So oftentimes they'll come back and they'll either give you the full amount that you want or some amount of it. And so then that's great. And then you, of course, have to decide if you're going to accept with that or not. I would say in general, don't go through this exercise with them if you really have no intention of accepting the job. Because if they come back and they meet all of your requests, they really do think that you're going to accept at that point. And so it's gonna leave some bad blood if they make an effort to come back, meet every one of your requests, and then you say, nah, I guess not. And it's a small town and you don't want to be burning bridges. So again, just be polite and reasonable in this whole process. And so the things that you want to avoid, don't involve your spouse, your parent, your best friend. This happens actually. This happens more than people are probably aware. That a spouse is on that phone call with the person and giving guidance in the background, like speakerphones on, and they're both negotiating. Don't do that. Oftentimes with a younger, earlier in their career, the parent is there. One or the parents. Don't do that. I cannot stress this enough. This is a business negotiation, and it's between you and this organization and nobody else. Now, I would advise having those conversations with those key people in your lives before the phone call, 100%. Make sure you run it by your friends, your spouse, your parent, whoever is important to you, so that you know everything in that offer. Maybe practice the whole conversation with them. But when you're making the call, it's just you and the employer and nobody else. It seems so simple. I would also say don't compare your offer with somebody else's. Maybe you have somebody who's working at that company. Maybe you heard somebody just got a job offer there and they're being paid something different. It's apples and oranges. So again, this is between you and the company for your position, and you don't know what that other person might have brought in terms of experience or background or whatever. But so don't compare. And also employers really, really hate it when employees start talking about their salaries and sharing salary information. I think it's a pretty common thing, but employers really hate it. And so you really you don't want to go there. The next one is one that seems like it's so obvious. Don't negotiate for situations that don't exist. And yet there's, again, so much research out there that shows that people do this all the time. I was working with a group of physicians at the University of Minnesota a few years ago. And it was women physicians, and there was all this research about how bad in medicine, it's one of the biggest gaps of salaries between men and women. And there was a recent study that had shown sort of what was happening here. And it happened that one of the things that the study had found was that women tended to negotiate for situations that don't exist far more than men do, but that both groups do this. And an example of this is you might decide, I'm not going to take that job as a consultant because even though it's super prestigious and a great career launch, but it requires a lot of travel. And if I had a family, I wouldn't be able to do that kind of travel and have a good family life. And yet what people find is that, they're not married, they don't have kids, they don't have a family. So they're negotiating for a scenario that doesn't even exist yet. Or in the case of a woman physician that I actually met at this workshop that I was doing, and afterwards she came up and she's like, oh, I have a sad story because I did exactly what I wasn't supposed to do. So she had graduated from her medical program and felt that she didn't want all the stress brought on her. So she thought, if I negotiate for a lesser salary, their expectations of me will be less. It won't be quite such a stressful job. And it'll be a better working environment for me. And it doesn't work that way. They just think that you're an idiot for not taking the money, because the job is the job and the expectation is the expectation. And so if it's going to be stressful, it's going to be stressful. Now you're just making less money. So don't be silly in the negotiation. Again, if they're making you the offer, they're assuming you know how to do the job and that you'll be able to handle it. If they didn't think that you could, they wouldn't make you an offer. So don't go underselling yourself. Don't go to weird things out there. And then don't apologize. You don't have to apologize for negotiating. I am from Minnesota, and Minnesotans are sort of these super polite, apologetic people. So, it's my DNA says that if I ask to negotiate, then I should say, I'm really sorry to be asking this. And it's not a big deal, but I'm sorry that I even have to bring it up. No, you're not sorry. It's a negotiation. It's a business deal. So don't apologize. Make your request, be reasonable, be polite, be professional, but don't apologize for it. And right along with that is that don't be wimpy. When I was saying, when you throw out that number to them and you feel like insecure about it. But then what happens is we'll say, if they're taking a couple seconds to think about it, we want to fill in the blanks. So we worry that we've overstepped something. So then we start saying things like, it's not a big deal. Forget I even asked about it. It doesn't have to be $5,000. I was just thinking it'd be nice, but it's not necessary. And so we sort of start backpedaling and getting all really, really wimpy about it. So don't do that either. Be bold, make your claim, throw that number out there, and then just shut up and let them think about it for a minute and let them process it, and then they will respond. And then all of this factors around this. Don't let it be emotional, because money is emotional for almost all of us. Money is wrapped up in a whole bunch of things about, what we value about ourselves. It might be from our childhood, if we grew up with money, if we didn't grow up with money. So it's emotional for us, but for them, they're not emotional about it. It's a business deal. Do they have the money? Do they not have the money? What happens if they give you this extra money? Is it a slippery slope for them? Are they going to have salary inflation for your job that is going to cause problems for other people or other offers? It's strictly a business transaction for them. So try as much as possible to keep your own emotions out of it, because it's not emotional for them. And it'll be easier for you if you take that really straightforward approach to it. So before we go to the asking for a promotion, any questions? I'm not monitoring the chat myself, but let me just see.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You've been really good at including like open quotes about sort of how to structure the conversation. Like I have, when you opened up with negotiating and how to negotiate, you put on there in quotes, is there any room to negotiate the base salary? So in terms of navigating the decision after they've said no, for example, what, in quotes, how would you respond to, sorry, we just don't have the funds right now? I'm taking notes and those are really helpful for me.
So it would depend on if you're intending to position, or if you're thinking then it's just too low, I can't do it. So if it was a situation where, yeah, it would have been nice to make 55 as opposed to 50, but you really want this job, you're really excited about it, and you'll take 50, then I would say, I understand. And I respect that's your salary, and I really do believe it's a good salary. So I'm excited about the position. I was wondering if there's a signing bonus attached to this position as well, and then just take it from them. And then if there is or isn't, now if they can't come up on the money and they can't come up with a signing bonus, and assuming that this isn't a relocation situation, then you have to be gracious about it, because now you've asked for 2 pieces of money and they've declined you on both of them. And so I think it's really important to show your enthusiasm, because you don't want them to be thinking, wow, she's not going to be happy that we haven't come up with the money. So then you could be, I'm so excited about joining the organization. These would have been nice to have, but really at the core, I'm just super excited to join the organization. I'm super excited to start this position. And so I'd be delighted to take the position. So I think that being able to overcome it with enthusiasm doesn't leave a bad taste in anybody's mouth. Now, on the other hand, if that $5,000, that whatever it was critical, like you can't take the job if they don't come up with that, then I think you just need to be really honest about it. I bring so much experience. I really need this position to be at least as high as what I was making previously. And I'm sorry, it's very disappointing, because I was so excited about the opportunity, but I simply would not be able to accept that as a base salary. And see what they say. They might decide that sure, they can come up with something, but if you can't take it, you can't take it. So again, I'd be polite, I'd be gracious, I'd be disappointed, and I'd be pretty honest with them about what the situation was.
Thank you.
Any other questions? How does the economy impact your ability to negotiate? A year ago, actually, it's interesting. So the question is about the economy, and does that change the ability to negotiate? I would say no. And in some ways, I think we're actually in a little bit better place to negotiate. Is that right? Is at least as good. So in the Great Resignation, companies were hiring, were actually offering pretty high salaries to get people to move or to accept the positions, because they had so many openings and they were quite desperate. So the economy is tightening up somewhat, but in general, I'd say there's always room to negotiate, and I'd say there's always a willingness for companies that are willing to negotiate. There's still that willingness to negotiate. If it is a company or an industry that's just taken a huge hit, if it's maybe a small local bank right now is a little tougher to negotiate just because of everything that's been going on. But in general, even if we're, we've looked at a lot of tech companies that are having layoffs, I still think that there's room to negotiate on offers for those companies. Again, understand the nature of that specific company, do a little bit of research, but no, I'd still negotiate. And from everything I've heard, and really, if you look at historic ways, if they're hiring, they have the money to hire. If they're hiring, and making you an offer, the coming up with 10% more is not going to break the bank for them. If it's really tough times for them, they probably are not looking to hire anyway, and they wouldn't have made you the offer in the first place. So. All right, Jesus, you have your hand up. Are you just waving, or did you have a question?
Hello. Yeah, I have a question. Would this negotiation strategy, would it work just for like the private sector, or would it also work government sector? Because I know government sector is they're more like their salaries kind of like lined up as a GS7, GS9.
I would say that there's room to negotiate for both. And because whether it's private or the government sector, almost every job has a salary range attached to it. And this is very true with the different levels in the government positions. But it's also very true within a more public corporate setting too, is that for that job, there's a range. And so they're not looking at a specific number. They're looking at something, from 50 to 70,000. And so as long as you're roughly within that range, there is some room for negotiation. So I would say whether it's a for-profit, a nonprofit, or government, there's still usually that range to negotiate in.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, any other questions? All right, for the last few minutes, I was thinking we would just move on to talking about sort of how you tweak this and ask for a promotion, because maybe you're in a job or organization that you're really happy with, you just want more money, or you want to move up to that next level within your organization. So how do you approach that conversation? And I will say a lot of it's the same, but there are a few little differences. So the first thing that I would say is really do a lot of soul searching. Why do you deserve this? Not just because you want more money, not because you're having a hard time making your ends meet on the salary, but why do you really deserve this? Why is it a good idea for you to be asking for this either raise or promotion? And be clear on that. And so now oftentimes it's because we think we've done a really, really great job at our jobs, and we've really contributed a lot, and we've been there and we haven't seen any increases. And so kind of think that we deserve it. More and more, we're also finding that perhaps we've been at our organization for a few years, and that what happened during this great resignation that's happened in the last few years is that now new people are being hired in at much higher than what we are currently making with our experience. And so I do think that also is a valid conversation to be having with your boss. But make sure that you're very clear on what it is that you need and why you think you need it. I would say also plan ahead, do some homework, do some planning and structuring, start maintaining a file of some of your work. So I remember back when many years ago, I was a drug rep. And I did this right along with my boss's boss. And he gave me this really great piece of advice for every project. And in my case, every call that I would go on with a doctor. Stop at the end of it and evaluate. What are 3 things that I thought I did really well? And what are 3 things that I would do differently if I could do them again? And this is, I think, something that I've taken in my career all throughout. When I wrap up a project, when I wrap up a program, what are things that I think I did really well on it? And what are some things that I think, wow, if I'd known then what I know now, I would have done this differently. And kind of keep a file of those projects. And then also at the same time, anytime somebody sends you an email or a text or a Teams message saying, hey, fantastic job, you really nailed this, you were awesome. Or if a customer sends you a note saying, we love doing business with you, save those so that when you go to your boss and say, you know what, I think I would like either that promotion or I would like a raise, that you can present this information to them, this documentation of how you've been doing a great job. And so in a perfect world, this means that you're planning well in advance and really from day one, that you're being a rock star at work, that you're keeping track of these things so that when you are prepared to schedule this meeting with your boss, and I would say, make it a meeting. So this is not sort of a track them down in the hallway and, hey, you know, I was thinking, this is an important conversation. So schedule a time and let your supervisor know what you want to talk about. Nobody likes to be blindsided. It makes them uncomfortable. Maybe this allows them to do a little homework themselves before the conversation. So schedule something. Bring your documentation, bring your notes on some of the work that you've done and what you think that you've done really well and what you've learned. And then again, make your pitch. Like, I would really love to be considered for this promotion or for this position that's open in a neighboring department, or I would like to stay with my current role, but I'm thinking this is the number that is a fair number for what I've been doing and contributing. And I would say, again, you know, try and do some research on, you know, if you're looking at your salary isn't matching some of the new hires, this is a delicate conversation because, again, employers hate it when their employees are talking. So this is sort of, I understand that the new hires are getting this general amount, but you don't want to be saying, I talked to so-and-so and they said they got this. So it is that sort of discrete conversation that you want to be having. Be positive. It's more about the positive contributions that you've made, the hard work, the really good job that you've been doing, as opposed to the negative, which is, I'm not getting paid as much as the new hires. I don't feel appreciated. I haven't had a raise. So try and keep it as positive as possible because people respond better to that. And again, try and keep your emotions out of it. It's a little tougher to keep your emotions out of it now. In the initial negotiation, they don't know you very well outside of that interview. Now they do, actually. So it is a little bit more of an emotional, personal conversation at this point. But again, ultimately for them, it's going to be a business decision, whether you're enough to invest in, and if this is going to cause problems with others in the department. So try and keep your emotions tapped down as much as possible. Do try and, you know, you want to be polite. So formally thank them, send them an email afterwards saying, you know, I really appreciated the time that you spent talking to me about this. You know, it's an important conversation to me, and I really appreciated the care and thoughtfulness that you gave in the conversation, even if ultimately they say no. Chances are good they're not going to say yes or no right away, because they're going to have to go and talk to somebody else. But also keep in mind, it's really tough to get a pay raise. It's really tough to reclassify somebody's position. And there might not be a promotion position available right now. So sometimes they literally can't do anything immediately. It's just going to be a process. And so understand that when they say, you know, I'm working on it, very likely they are working on it, and it takes some time. Things to keep in mind, understand what the organization's budget cycle is, because if you're asking for an increase in pay and it's sort of mid-budget, it might not have been allocated for your department to have that kind of money spent mid. So these are things that it's good to have these conversations in the budget planning for next year phase. And so if oftentimes that's somewhere in the 6 months to 9 months through that fiscal calendar, when people are really starting to think about what is it that we're going to need for next year, so that they can put that money into that budget. So you kind of have to be a little bit savvy and strategic in the timing and the expectation. But I do think that it's important to have the conversations, because, and I have it on my next slide, you can't assume that they're going to automatically see that you're doing a great job and offer you money or a raise or a promotion. Because to be honest, it's such a pain in the neck to go through some of these things that as a manager, I might be thinking, if they seem happy, let them just be happy, because filing the money to get a position reclassed is a ton of work for me. Or if I have to run it up several layers to see if I can get them an increase in salary, you know, that's stressful, it's time consuming. If they're not asking for it, I'm probably, as a manager, not going to bother. So don't assume that just because you're doing a great job, people will see this and recognize it. They might see it, but they might just think, yeah, hopefully they'll stay just happy and content. But again, don't involve anybody else. It's just between you and them. Again, you don't want to be comparing salaries. You don't want to be comparing your performance to somebody else in the department. It's about you and your performance, and that's all. Be careful about offering ultimatums, like if you don't give me this, I'm out of here, because they might say, okay, you can pack up your stuff. So really be careful of that. Every once in a while, you know, if you do have another offer, you might be able to use that to leverage, but just be careful, because if they are also thinking, well, they're looking. So even if we give them this, they're probably already discontent, and so we might as well just cut our losses, let them go. So just be really careful with the ultimatums. Oftentimes it backfires. And like I said, you just can't expect that immediate yes. So any questions on any of that? All right, I am going to, I think my next slide is just a question slide, but it has my contact information. Ellen, looks like you have your hand up.
I had a question. So, you know, if you are somewhere and you're looking for a job somewhere else, you mentioned, you know, don't do the ultimatum piece, but is it a good idea to go to your current employer and say, you know, I do have this offer for X dollars or for something, you know, comparable? Would you meet it, or should you just say, or should you just not even do the, you know, back and forth?
I would say depends on your relationship with your manager, and but be careful, because if you've got a good relationship with your manager, and you can go to them and say, you know what, I really would love it here, but you know, I was having this conversation with somebody, and it wound up they chatting, and they made me this offer, and it's pretty good. As much as I'd love to stay, is there any way that our company can match this? Just be careful, because even if it's somebody you have a great relationship with, they could turn around and say, no, we can't. So you should probably take that. And you don't really want to get into that situation where now you're defending why you should be able to keep your job. So just if you're going to use that as a tool, know that it's a last resort tool, probably.
Okay, thank you very
April, did
much.
you have a question?
Yeah, we've actually had a couple more questions rolling in chat. So we've got Abby, Lisa, Caroline, and Amanda.
All right. All right. Let me look at some of these. Okay. Yes, certifications as a reason to get a raise, I would say absolutely. Additional degrees, I think are, if you're in our graduate programs, you're working on that. And certificates, I think are both really good reasons to start having that conversation. And you can have that conversation even before you complete this, like I'm really excited about this organization, and I've been doing so much to invest in my own personal growth so that I'm really able to be even a better employee, more strategic thinker. I'm finishing up this certification program. Can we talk about if there'd be a possibility for any compensation changes as a result of that? Absolutely, 100%. I think that advanced degrees and certification, even if they didn't ask you to do it, if you're doing it on your own, I think is a great way to start that conversation. Salary transparency being so highlighted right now. Okay, so here's the problem with this whole salary transparency, and can you talk about if other people's salary within the organization? It's such an interesting conversation right now. And you look at states like Colorado, and they've actually made it illegal for companies to post a position without giving the salary range because people are complaining that there's no transparency. So on the one hand, yes, it's changing, and I think it will continue to change, and for the better, that people are going to be much more honest about this. On the other hand, there's a lot of just built-in generations, decades of you don't talk about these things. And from a manager standpoint, it's super frustrating if you know that your employees are comparing salaries. Because as a manager, I might look at it and say, I've offered you different salaries because you brought different things into it. And even if your degrees might be exactly the same and your years of experience might be exactly the same, your perspective, your personality, your drive, your initiative might change. And I don't want, it's not always, you can fill out a matrix and come up with a pay. So yes, I do think that it's, again, even a company that says we're super transparent, I think sometimes they're not always as transparent as their policies say. So just, again, be kind of careful. Now, on the other hand, if you're working for an organization and like people talk about it all the time and it's freely discussed and you're in those conversations, then sure, I think you can bring it up. But if you get a sense like people don't really talk about these things, then just be careful about letting it seem like you have been sort of gossiping about salaries, because you just want to be savvy about it. Time limit for salary renegotiation, how long should I wait? No, not really. I don't think there's any time limit. If you've been a rock star and people have been saying you're a rock star, I think you can start asking pretty soon. I mean, I would wait probably, I think 3 months seems like a good minimum. If you've been an absolute rock star, if you've been, and here's the thing, so and I hear this all the time from employers. You also have to know exactly how good an employer, how much of a rock star you are. So if, most of us are on a performance plan where they give us a rating of 1 out of 5, and 3 is you do your job. 3 is you do the exact job you were hired to do it in the manner we anticipated you would do it. You show up on time, you do your job, you do it well. That's a 3. So if you've been a 3, I don't know that I would go into my boss at 3 months and say, hey, I deserve a raise because I've been doing the job exactly as you anticipated for the salary that we negotiated 3 months ago, but now I want more money. If on the other hand, you're like a 5, you are there early, you're putting in the time, your clients love you, you're going above and beyond, you're helping your coworkers, you've taken things off of your boss's plate because you just are that good and that eager, then yeah, sure, I think you can go in at 3 months. So there's not really any set time frame, but just make sure where you sit on that 1 to 5 continuum before you go in too early. Let's see. Wow, lots of questions. All right, I think that's most of the questions. Oh, so the question, managers see an obvious gap. Should we ever expect them to fight for us? Or is it a situation where we would have to find out? Actually, sometimes managers do realize that there's a huge gap and they will fight for you. Especially if you have been a really great employee with a great attitude and they realize, that the new hires are getting paid considerably more. Or that you just outperformed what they anticipated. A good manager oftentimes will say, I really need to fight for this person. And oftentimes completely, without sharing this with you, they will go and start advocating for either a raise or a promotion or a job reclassification for you. So it's definitely possible and not out of line, but if they're busy, you just can't count on it. And even so, it might be out of their hands. So I think you sometimes have to be, and I hate to say too patient, but somewhat understanding that if they are advocating for something more for you, it again might take some time. It might need to be that next budget year. But yeah, it does happen. And I would still have a conversation with your supervisor to let them know that you would be very appreciative, and see if they can get that whole ball rolling for you. All right. Any other questions? I realize I'm 3 minutes over and I apologize for that. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. We can set up a one-on-one conversation to talk about your specific situation, but really grateful for you guys to be here and to stick around for that 4 minutes now extra, because I know your time's valuable.
Thank you, Tess.
Yeah.
It was great. All right, and thanks everyone for attending. Have a great day.